Good morning, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me. This is the lovely podcast, The Endurance of Labor Laws. I am your lovely host, Lesley Sullivan, and this is episode 30. And today we're going to take a look at Unite Here. So this one was founded in 2004, but first of all, let's take a look. I want to give a shout out to some of my listeners. And FYI, where I live, they are installing new fiber optics. So if you hear like a loud knock on my door, I will have to stop the podcast just for a little bit and let them in to put in new fiber optics for internet and things like that. But first of all, let me give a shout out to some of my listeners. British Columbia, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. Virginia, Texas, Oklahoma, and Pennsylvania. You know, every time I see Pennsylvania, I either think of the Hershey Chocolate Factory, or I think of this really hot attorney, a very handsome attorney, that is on CNN every now and then. I think he's from Philadelphia, if I remember correctly. And I think his name is Danny Cervajos. I can't remember how to pronounce his last name. I think it's either Spanish or España. I can't remember like which way you pronounce it, because it depends on the dialect, like linguistically. But his name is Danny Cervajos, I think is his name, or Cervajos. And he is very handsome. So all I can say is thank you, CNN, for distracting me from my work whenever he is on TV. But, you know, God bless you, Danny, and I pray that you're doing very well in your career and in your health. And Merry Christmas to you and your family. In terms of countries, United States and Canada, love you, Canada. You guys are awesome. I want to give a shout out to some platforms here that are doing really well for my podcast. There's Stitcher, there is Overcast, Podcast Addict, and there was something else. I can't remember what the mobile app was. Oh, Spotify, and then Reason. I had not heard of that one, but I got a notification that some of my listeners were listening to my podcast on that outlet as well. So thank you for that. I'm learning more and more about these platforms. Just because I'm not always aware of them. I thought I was, but I guess there's all these different platforms that help podcast people such as myself get their name out there and also make it available for listeners. And I was just thinking about it when I saw what episode I'm going to be doing today. It's episode 30. Can you believe it's already been 30 episodes? So this is really growing. It's doing really well. I mean, God is good. I'm so thankful for that. So again, let's go ahead and get started here. So it's called Unite Here. And its predecessor was Unite and Here. So I guess there were two of them, and they united it together or merged it. It was founded at July 9th, 2004. It's headquartered in New York City, New York. It has locations in the United States and Canada. It has a little over 300,000 members. Their president is Donald D. Taylor, and their former president is John W. Wilhelm, I think is how you pronounce his last name. They have affiliations with AFL-CIO and CLC. So let's see here. It says Unite Here is a labor union in the United States and Canada with roughly 300,000 active members. The union's members work predominantly in the hotel, food service, laundry, warehouse, and casino gambling industries. I did not know that in regards to laundry and the casino gambling industries. That's very interesting. So it says the union was formed in 2004 by the merger of Union of Needle Trades, Industrial and Textile Employees, and Hotel Employees and Restaurant Employees Union. That's why. Okay. I was kind of semi-familiar with the previous union, but I didn't know why all of these were put together. Okay, so that makes more sense now. It says in 2005, Unite Here withdrew from the AFL-CIO and joined the Change to Win Federation, along with several other unions, including the Teamsters, Service Employees International Union, also known as SEIU, and the UFCW. In May 2009, Union President Bruce Rayner, originally from Unite, left Unite Here, taking with him numerous local unions and between 105,000 and 150,000 members, mostly garment workers and a labor-owned bank. That's interesting. Amalgamated bank. I was wondering about banking with this. They formed a new SEIU affiliate called Workers United. Okay. On September 17, 2009, Unite Here announced that it would reaffiliate with AFL-CIO. With each of these unions that they disaffiliate, then reaffiliate, I kind of want to know why. So once we go through all these labor unions, number one, we will go through all the legal mandates, the laws, and amendments and legislation that has affected these unions or things that they want to see done or they don't want done. Because every so often they'll mention, like, I guess, like the Taft Act or something like that. And so I think it's important that we know what those are, because personally I don't, not off the top of my head. And then I want to do another series that's about the charities that they supposedly help out. And then also take a look at different banking industries in regards to unions and things like that. And then lastly, take a look at why are they affiliating and de-affiliating with AFL-CIO and what is causing that. My guess is they get a little moody or irritated about something and they leave, which they have every right to do that. But I'm always interested in what makes them go back. So it says here, Bruce Rayner, then president of Unite, and John W. Wilhelm of HERE became close friends after a meeting on a HERE picket line at Yale University in 2003. That's interesting. The two men quickly concluded that their unions should merge. Unite HERE was formed in 2004 by the merger of Unite, the Union of Needle Trades, Industrial and Textile Employees, and HERE, Hotel Employees and Restaurant Employees International Union. The impetus for the merger was the Unite was wealthy but losing a significant number of members, while HERE had little cash but had a large number of organizing opportunities which could lead to hundreds of thousands of new members and also more money. It definitely comes down to money sometimes. The merged entity had 440,000 active members and about 400,000 retired members in both the United States and Canada. I would want to know which country had more members and which country had more retirees, because that would definitely kind of be eye-opening there. Rayner was elected general president of the merged union, and Wilhelm was named president of the merged union's hospitality division, but the two men shared executive, budgetary, and personnel duties. In 2005, Unite HERE withdrew from the AFL-CIO and joined the Change to Win Federation, along with several other unions, including the Laborers International Union of North America, International Brotherhood of Teamsters, Service Employees International Union, United Farm Workers, and United Food and Commercial Workers. Unite HERE Vice President Edgar Romney was elected the first Secretary-Treasurer of the new Labor Federation. The next section is about the split and re-affiliation with AFL-CIO, so this might give us some insight. The merger of Unite and HERE faced initial difficulties due to disagreements between its leaders. By 2007, Rayner was accusing Wilhelm of stifling change, and Wilhelm was angry at Rayner's heavy-handed managerial style. Rayner's critics also said the union president often agreed to sweetheart deals that hurt workers, but which added new members and avoided protracted organizing battles. According to at least one account, Rayner was unhappy that the HERE faction had a majority on the board, which permitted Wilhelm and his supporters to veto his proposals. Rayner allegedly began talking about a divorce of the two merged unions in order to precipitate just such an outcome. In 2007, the union lost its bargaining certificate at Vancouver's General Motors Place. The British Columbia Labor Relations Board conducted a vote to find the employees' preferred affiliation with the Christian Laborers Association of Canada. Significant conflict within the union emerged in early 2009. The union had 366,958 members at the end of 2008. In late 2008, General President Bruce Rayner and 15 local and regional Unite HERE affiliates in the industry and garment industries filed lawsuits against Hospitality Division President John Wilhelm, accusing him and his division of fraud, theft, gross mismanagement of $61 million in funds committed to union organizing drives, and failing to resolve members' grievances. Rayner also accused Wilhelm and his allies of attempting to impose their will on the executive board and the majority of members. Wilhelm and several affiliate leaders in the hospitality division sued Rayner and his allies in the laundry and garment division, claiming that Rayner had acted in violation of the union's constitution and procedures in firing large numbers of Wilhelm supporters in Detroit and Phoenix, Arizona. Wilhelm also accused Rayner of disloyalty and dual unionism for continuing to press for the disaffiliation of the garment division affiliates after the Unite HERE executive board had voted down the proposal. By March 2009, the conflict had become unresolvable. On March 7, 2009, Rayner and his supporters had a disaffiliation referendum vote among the members in their affiliate unions in advance of Unite Here's quadrennial convention, if I'm not really sure how to pronounce that word, but it says quad, so I'm guessing they meet 4 times a year with their conventions, set for summer 2009, and said that if they were successful, they would affiliate with the Service Employees International Union, SEIU. Wilhelm and his supporters said that the Unite Here Constitution prevented any such vote without the permission of the International Union's Executive Board. Also at issue was control over Amalgamated Bank, which Unite brought with it into the merger and whose ownership and its substantial net worth now belonged to Unite Here. Wilhelm sued Rayner and the 15 affiliates in February 2009 in U.S. District Court, but the court declined to prevent the vote. The period before the vote led to more accusations of misconduct. Wilhelm and his supporters accused SEIU President Andrew Stern of supporting Rayner's disaffiliation move, a charge Stern vigorously denied. Wilhelm also accused Rayner of supporting the disaffiliation effort only because he faced a difficult re-election bid and of misusing union money and staff to support the secession effort. Rayner categorically denied all charges. Delegates from the 15 affiliates representing 100,000 members met in Philadelphia in late March, and on March 22, 2009, they voted to disaffiliate from Unite Here and establish a new union, Workers United. Workers United immediately affiliated with SEIU. Former Unite Here elected officer Edgar Romney, Former Unite Here elected officer Edgar Romney was elected president of Workers United. Sorry about that. Sometimes the grammar is funky in these articles. Despite winning the disaffiliation vote, Rayner announced he would finish his term as general president of Unite Here rather than join Workers United, a move one newspaper said undertaken so that Workers United could gain control of the Amalgamated Bank. So again, I'm not surprised that it's a fight over money because that does tend to happen with unions. Unite Here and Workers United began arguing over who had jurisdiction over various kinds of workers and how to divide Unite Here's assets, most importantly, the bank. Wilhelm asked a federal court to give Unite Here control over all the union's assets, but the court declined to issue a ruling at that time. Joseph T. Hansen, president of the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW, attempted to mediate a solution in mid-April, proposing, among other things, that Unite Here take jurisdiction over workers in the gaming industry and hotels, that Workers United take jurisdiction over workers in textiles and laundries, and that the two unions split organizing and food service. Hansen also suggested that Workers United keep the Amalgamated Bank and the former New York City headquarters of Unite, but that Workers United make a multi-million-dollar payment to Unite Here to compensate for the losses. Wilhelm rejected the offer. I don't know why they don't just split it down the middle, if that's what it really kind of comes down to. Andrew Stern then suggested that each union retain their existing casino workers, but that Unite Here have exclusive jurisdiction over casino workers in the future. Workers United would also pay Unite Here $20 million immediately and $46 million move within 5 years if Unite Here would agree to turn the Amalgamated Bank and other of Unite's pre-merger assets over to Workers United. United States Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid also unsuccessfully attempted to mediate the dispute, which I don't trust Harry Reid. I'm just not impressed with him. American Federation of Teachers President Randy Weingartner urged the sides to settle as well, writing a letter to both Rayner and Wilhelm cautioning that this conflict is causing collateral damage. The longer it continues, the less likely we are to enact a strong employee-free choice act. That would be interesting to take a look at that. Rayner did not finish his term. In April 2009, Wilhelm formally charged Rayner of using union resources to support the disaffiliation movement. Later that month, the Unite Here Executive Board gave Wilhelm the power to suspend Rayner as the union's president, pending an investigation into Wilhelm's charges. Wilhelm suspended Rayner on May 15th. Rayner sued Wilhelm in Unite Here in federal court, arguing suspension was not permitted under the union's constitution. At 4 a.m. on May 22nd, Unite Here's executive board and John Wilhelm ordered security guards to secure Rayner's New York City office and prevent Rayner and his allies from entering. Wilhelm said he acted to prevent the destruction of documents and that Rayner's staff had already removed hundreds of documents and scrubbed computer hard drives clean. Wilhelm told the press on May 28th that Unite Here staff had found documents showing that Rayner was receiving confidential updates about workers' United activities and finances, even though he was still a Unite Here official, and that he had shifted millions of dollars of union assets to affiliates seeking disaffiliation. Juan Gonzalez, a columnist for New York Daily News, reported on June 16, 2009, that Rayner had transferred more than $12 million to affiliates, which supported him, as well as to groups outside the union. The transfers allegedly included, there's a list here, a January 31st, 2009 transfer of $457,981 to the organizing group, a consulting firm founded by Steve Rosenthal, a close associate of former SEIU President Andrew Stern. The organizing group, the paper said, used the money to mail and call to Unite Here members and advocate for disaffiliation and to set up a pro-disaffiliation website. And the second item is about a dozen transfers totaling $11.2 million between January 26th and 31st, 2009 to affiliates which support Rayner and the disaffiliation movement. The affiliates then allegedly transferred the funds to an external group called Fund for the Future, which supported the disaffiliation effort. The third item listed is another dozen transfers totaling $500,000 on March 6, 2009, sent to supportive affiliates allegedly to reimburse them for expenditures. That is very interesting. According to internal union documents obtained by the newspaper, Rayner disbursed the money without the required approval from Wilhelm. Wilhelm also accused Rayner of, I don't know what this word is, absconding. I'm not sure what that means because I've never seen it. With the $23 million Unite Here strike fund, which was invested in the Amalgamated Bank, and invested another $333 million in long-term assets so that the union could not function. Just think about that. They have access to $333 million, this union does. That's how powerful some of these unions are, and that really concerns me. Rayner categorically denied the charges. Rayner sued Wilhelm and Unite Here, seeking an injunction, access to his office, and return of all property therein. The court declined the request for conjunctive relief on May 26th. An angry Rayner accused Wilhelm of removing his personal files from the office and resigned on May 30th, mere hours before the start of the hearing on his suspension. Wilhelm was named General President of Unite Here after Rayner's resignation. He was elected to the position at the union's fourth meeting convention in July 2009. Wilhelm subsequently accused SEIU of spending millions of dollars to convince more Unite Here members to disaffiliate and join Workers United. Unite Here retaliated by urging employers not to recognize or negotiate with the locals affiliated with Workers United or honor their dues check-off agreements. That's very interesting. Stern disputed the claim, saying SEIU was merely helping its affiliate regain textile workers still part of Unite Here, and the SEIU itself had a legitimate right to organize workers in food service. Stern also said on August 12, 2009 that the efforts had stopped. Nonetheless, UFCW President Joe Hansen continued to try to mediate a resolution and expressed his hope that a settlement was possible. In July 2009, the presidents of 27 national unions signed a letter sent to Stern in which they announced their support of Unite Here and said they would help defend the union against any raid on its membership or incursion, I'm not sure I pronounced that word, into its organizing jurisdiction. The remaining 265,000 members of Unite Here re-affiliated with the AFL-CIO on September 17, 2009. On July 25, 2010, SEIU and Unite Here announced they had resolved their 18-month-long dispute. As part of the agreement, ownership of the Amalgamated Bank will be transferred to Workers United pending approval of federal banking regulators. Unite Here retained ownership of the union's headquarters in New York City and an additional $75 million in assets. The agreement also settles a jurisdictional dispute over which workers the unions will organize. Unite Here agreed to restrict its organizing the food service industry to those workers at airline caterers, airports, businesses, convention centers, and athletic stadiums, while SEIU and Workers United will restrict its organizing activity in the industry to food service workers in state and local government, healthcare facilities, and prisons. Both unions will continue to organize food service workers in elementary, middle, and secondary schools and in higher education. The two unions had also disagreed over whether several thousand members of Workers United had been given the opportunity to choose which union they wished to belong to. In the new agreement, SEIU and Unite Here agreed to let an arbitrator decide to which union the workers wished to belong. At least one analyst characterized the agreement as SEIU surrendered most of the assets of the venerable splinter union it had tried to absorb and gave up some jurisdiction it had sought. On November 29, 2012, Donald D. Taylor was named the new president of Unite Here after the retirement of former president John W. Wilhelm. That was a long segment for sure. Let me get a drink of water. Hold on just one moment. Okay, I'm back. So the next section is Hands Off, Pants On. It says Hands Off, Pants On is a campaign against sexual harassment in the hotel industry in Chicago. Well, just FYI, Chicago is very corrupt and crooked, so I'm not surprised they're having problems with this. The campaign was led by Unite Here Local 1. In 2016, the union conducted a survey of about 500 hotel workers. It found that 58% of hotel employees and 77% of casino workers said they had been sexually harassed. 49% of housekeepers claimed to have been subject to indecent exposure. The survey was supposedly in response to a case where a waitress at Neil Bloom's Rivers Casino was pulled onto the lap of a guest and asked for oral sex. Unite Here has proposed legislation that would ban hotel guests who have sexually harassed an employee. The union also supported requiring hotels to give panic buttons to any employees who work alone in guest rooms. Now that is actually really smart. Because sometimes, a housekeeper or a hotel worker might go into a room and they may not know who's in there per se, and they may not know what their intentions are. So that I would agree with. It says unionized hotels would be exempt from these rules. Then we have the 2018 Marriott strike. It says Unite Here organized a multi-city strike against Marriott hotels in fall 2018, the largest multi-city hotel workers strike to date. Citing Marriott's failure to negotiate key issues, 8,300 Marriott workers from across the U.S. voted to authorize a strike in September 2008. Workers in San Francisco and Boston were the first to take action on October 3rd and 4th, followed by workers in San Diego, Oakland, Hawaii, Detroit, and San Jose, affecting 23 hotels overall. I'm surprised it wasn't more than that with the strike. Workers struck for weeks, often in severe weather conditions, for better job security and living wages. While the specific demands varied from property to property, workers rallied around the idea that one job should be enough, with many citing a need to work 2 or 3 jobs in order to make ends meet. In addition to enduring significant pressure from the strike, Marriott also suffered a massive security breach with its Starwood database as early as September 2008, in which the secure information of 500 million guests may have been compromised. Marriott kept the breach under wraps until news broke on November 30th, prompting Unite Here leadership to draw parallels between Marriott's lack of accountability and transparency towards both its customer base and its workforce. Settlements began to be reached between Marriott and the various Unite Here locals in late November. The last contract was ratified in San Francisco on December 3rd, with 99.6% of the 2,500 local members voting in favor. Across the country, the newly ratified contracts included significant increases to wages and other benefits, as well as stronger protections against sexual harassment in the workplace. Now that last part, I greatly agree with, because regardless of what industry you work in, sexual harassment is not appropriate whatsoever. And what I find interesting is that if this stuff is going on in a hotel, why isn't the hotel, just as part of being a hotel in the private sector, why isn't it taking those measures before it becomes a big problem? Like, why isn't it handling it before then? Because I look at it this way. Let's say, for example, there was I'm making this up. Let's say there's a big fancy company on Wall Street and there's extreme sexual harassment going on. When that would hit the fan, that would be such a huge news story. Oh my goodness, there would be millions of dollars that would be going into a lawsuit, things like that, because sexual harassment, especially some of the grotesqueness that they mentioned in this article, is not supposed to be happening in an office. But unfortunately, it's almost kind of seen as acceptable behavior at hotels and casinos. I don't know why there is acceptable forms of degradation to workers in hotels and casinos. I don't understand that. I mean, it just makes no sense to me, because when you respect somebody, you respect them regardless of what job they're working and regardless of what industry they work in. Because, I look at it this way. Like, it doesn't matter if someone works in food service or if they are a CEO of a bank. Everybody is equal. You have equal rights in this country. And especially when it comes to labor. That doesn't mean we all make the same wages, because that would be communism and fascism and, a little pinch of socialism there, but especially communism. And in case there are some people listening, maybe that are from other countries that aren't really sure what communism is, because maybe you've never had it in your country, or maybe it's just unheard of. The reason why communism is such a dangerous thing is because you have these radicals that are in charge of your government. And what they do is they try and suck all the money out of the private sector. And an example of this is the Soviet Union, Russia. Russia used to be the Soviet Union, which was known as the USSR. And so what happened during the communist days of this regime was the communist government basically took over people's lives. That's what communism does. It strips you of your rights. So basically, you're not really a citizen anymore. You're almost just kind of like a paid slave in a way, because you don't really get to decide things for yourself anymore. And one of the things that the Communist Party does, and what it did during this time, was it took over the banking system. It took and confiscated people's private property, and it also tried to force people into industries for labor that they had never worked before. So a lot of their labor force became unskilled labor, because the government was trying to decide for you what job you should be doing. So basically, you have these higher ups that are in complete control of the country, and then everybody else is a peasant, literally. And, the United States, and pretty much the entire planet, was not really aware of what all was going on in the Soviet Union, because literally it was a closed society. So we didn't find out a lot of this stuff that was going on, and the deprivation that was happening towards their citizens, and starvation that was going on, and the hostile military action that was taking place in regards to foreigners that would visit, unless you were a higher up government official. But it was very much discouraged for foreigners to visit the Soviet Union during that time. And their citizens had a very hard time leaving that country. Like, it was a miracle if their citizens got out, because their government pretty much confiscated their passports and things like that, held them hostage there in their country, and then dictated to them how much money they're going to make. Because what the government did in the USSR was that it tried to make everybody the same, like you're a drone. So you're going to be doing the same kind of work. Everybody's going to make the same kind of pay. And the way they got away with getting into power was they would demonize the private sector. They would demonize capitalism. They demonized the church. So, we're seeing some of those same things in communist China right now. Like, for example, the Christian faith is not technically there is no legal religion in China. All religions are illegal there. So Christianity is very much underground in communist China right now. And if they catch you practicing Christianity, you can be imprisoned, you can be tortured, and never heard from again. It's very serious over there. Like there are a lot of underground Christian pastors over there that, they're begging the United States, Christians over here to send them Bibles, send them material, but, they're doing everything they can. But just to kind of give you some insight into how dangerous their job is compared to what we deal with here in the United States, if they get caught with a Bible over there in China, they are doomed. It is very serious. They are arrested immediately. They can be falsely accused of being a spy. And they are very much persecuted over there. And they could be executed. I mean, people just disappear randomly over there in China. So it's one of those things that you have to be careful who you elect in your government, but also, even in unions. And that's one thing that I'm noticing with unions is that it's a power struggle. And we saw that here in this union with Unite Here, that one of the biggest struggles was over those monies in that bank. Because I was kind of wondering if we were ever going to see one that dealt with the banking industry and the banking system because, it's one of those things where we have laws and regulations at the federal level and the state level in regards to banking. And there's a reason for that. And I'm not a fan of every little law on the planet. For sure I'm not. But there are laws and bylaws that are in place to protect our banking system, not the banker, not the CEO, but the banking system. Meaning the stability of our currency for our country, right? Those laws and bylaws also help to protect the consumer, which is you and me. Because technically you don't have to be a U.S. citizen to have a bank account here. If you, trying to think what the requirement is now. Well, that may have changed. I take that back. I'd have to look that up. Because used to, I didn't think you had to be a citizen. As long as you had a driver's license and you showed that you had a worker's permit and things like that. But things might have changed with Homeland Security. So we will circle back to that because I don't want to tell you wrong. Because I'm not in the banking industry, like fully vetted or anything. So I don't know every little thing to that. But back in the day, it was a lot simpler to open a bank account. Whereas post 9/11, things really changed with Homeland Security being created and things like that. And then also there have been new laws and regulations that have come down the pipeline from the federal government in regards to that. So I know that it can be a little more difficult, but it's not as bad as in other countries. But it's also not as easy as in other countries. But it's just one of those things that when it comes to monies, especially with unions, there is going to be a fight. So if anything, I would kind of want to research this and see why these other unions that we have been looking at, why they affiliate and then disaffiliate with AFL-CIO and all these others, and why they're splitting and then why they merge and things like that. It kind of reminds me of some of the churches that I know of here in Oklahoma. I'm not going to say what church I went to as a kid, but I actually saw a split in the church I was raised in, and it was horrible. And it wasn't necessarily about money, although I was a teeny bopper at the time, but it was predominantly about power, so maybe there was a money issue there. But what happened was, in the church I was attending, was we had a new preacher that was hired, and I personally did not like him. I felt he was too young. Even as a teeny bopper, I was like, he's too young and stupid to be a pastor. I didn't trust him as an authority figure. And I didn't think he was very competent. And plus, if you really listened to his sermons, he kind of has his own little agenda as opposed to preaching God's word. And I just kind of thought that was odd. And so then I started noticing who he was associating with and who he was alienating. And I noticed this as a teeny bopper. I just kind of thought it was odd because young people, they notice what adults do. So then what happened was our church split because we had some really young guys that wanted to become deacons and elders, but they were too young and inexperienced because this is a kind of church where you had to vote for people, only men. There were not women allowed to be deacons or elders. At this particular church, we basically were not allowed to open our mouth. We were not allowed to speak or pray in the presence of men, unless it was kind of more communal on how else to describe it. But women were very much treated as second or third class citizens at this church. So I basically got to sit there and just observe a bunch of stuff. So, because I wasn't really allowed to participate in anything. But anyway, you had these young guys, that maybe they were newly married or had a couple kids, who knows what, but they wanted power. And so there was a split because the deacons, the current deacons and the current elders, they did not approve of these young guys becoming deacons and elders, because I think they properly identified, and I agreed with the older elders, I thought they were correct in this, that these young guys, they just want to be in a position of power, and who knows what direction they're wanting to take this church. So the church split, and it was a bad split. It was really bad. There were confrontations. It was really weird, and this is a so-called Christian church, right? So a bunch of people left and went to a different physical location, because they had several churches throughout Oklahoma City that you could attend underneath this umbrella of this church. So many people left, and then they actually kicked out the elders. They basically fired them, and they kicked out all the deacons and elders that they thought were the problem, and they put these young guys in charge of the church. And the pastor, who was this young guy, he just kind of acted all innocent and everything, and I wasn't falling for it. I was like, he was the troublemaker. He was the instigator. That's the thing. What's interesting is that these older elders and deacons, they were one of the ones that really liked this young preacher, and they're the ones that really hired him. And then next thing you know, the very person they hired fires them. I mean, it was really weird. So then you had the creation of another church. So it's like a split off of a split. And what I noticed within this church was that whenever they get angry about something, they leave, they quit. They don't really try and work it out. They just are very bullheaded and narrow-minded. And then next thing we know, our preacher leaves. So it's like he just came in, caused a lot of problems, and then just left. He ruffled a bunch of feathers and then just left. So I just thought, that's not what a preacher is supposed to do, and that's not what a leader does. A leader doesn't cause problems, they solve problems. So I learned that when I was really young, and I'm 37 now, but it was very disappointing to see that. So I can kind of see the correlation. Like when I see a split within a union, that's why it gets my attention very quickly whenever I see an affiliation or a de-affiliation or a re-affiliation, because it makes me wonder what was going on before that split, and then what happened for them to come back. So for sure with this particular situation with this union, it was definitely about money and a power struggle. In the church I went to, it was definitely a power struggle. I don't know about the money side of it. There probably was a problem as well, but who knows. But anyway, that is it for this lovely podcast. The next one, we will take a look at the National Postal Mail Handlers Union. That one should be interesting. And it says it is a division of LIUNA. So this should be, it says United States Postal Service workers other than letter carriers. So it looks like there's a couple of different types of postal workers, whether they're a clerk or a mail handler or a letter handler. It's hard to say that over and over again. But anyway, I will go ahead and end this podcast. And as usual, I pray that you're happy, healthy, and whole, that you have a Merry Christmas. I can't even talk. A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.